What if I told you that Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, discovered a psychological principle so powerful that it can completely transform how others perceive you simply by changing how you see yourself? Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will shatter everything you thought you knew about human relationships. Carl Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what happens when that irritation comes from being consistently undervalued, dismissed, or taken for granted? Have you ever felt like you were pouring your heart and soul into someone only to watch them treat you like you were invisible? Here's what Jung discovered about this painful experience that will change your perspective forever. In his groundbreaking work on the human psyche, Carl Jung identified what he called the shadow, those parts of ourselves we suppress or deny. But Jung discovered something fascinating. When we consistently allow others to undervalue us, we're not just being kind or patient. We're actually projecting our own shadow onto the relationship. According to Carl Jung, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And here lies the crux of why we tolerate being undervalued. We haven't fully accepted our own worth. But Jung uncovered a psychological trick so simple yet so powerful that it can completely flip the dynamic in any relationship. And I'm about to reveal exactly what it is. Let me tell you about someone who discovered this principle firsthand. There was once a person, let's call them the seeker, who lived what Jung would describe as a projected life. They gave endlessly to others, seeking validation through service, kindness, and constant availability. Carl Jung discovered that this behavior stems from what he termed the wounded healer archetype. The seeker was unconsciously trying to heal their own sense of unworthiness by healing others. But here's what Jung found that will shock you. The very people we're trying to please are unconsciously drawn to reject us. And the reason why will completely change how you approach every relationship. According to Carl Jung's theory of psychological projection, when we don't value ourselves, we unconsciously signal this to others. They begin to mirror our own internal relationship with ourselves. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The seeker noticed this pattern. The more they gave, the less others appreciated them. The more available they became, the more they were taken for granted. But then something extraordinary happened. The seeker encountered a teacher who understood Jung's most profound discovery about human psychology. What this teacher revealed changed everything. The teacher, well versed in Jungian psychology, explained, when you pour water into a cup that's already full, what happens? It overflows, replied the seeker. Exactly, said the teacher. But Jung discovered something deeper. You're not just overflowing the cup, you're reflecting your own internal cup. If your internal cup doesn't value what it holds, why should anyone else's? Carl Jung said, your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens? This is where Jung's research gets absolutely fascinating. He discovered that our external relationships are perfect mirrors of our internal relationship with ourselves. And when you understand this principle, you gain the power to transform every relationship in your life. According to Carl Jung, we don't just attract what we want, we attract what we unconsciously believe we deserve. The seeker was unconsciously believing they deserved to be undervalued, and their behavior was communicating this to everyone around them. The teacher shared a story that perfectly illustrated Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Jung discovered that every person contains within them what he called the self, a perfect, unshakable core of worth. But here's the psychological twist that most people never realize. Once a pearl of extraordinary beauty was discovered. People admired its brilliance and clarity, but over time, as it passed from hand to hand, its value was forgotten. It was treated as an ordinary stone, discarded and ignored. Tell me, asked the teacher, did the pearl lose its worth, or did the people lose their ability to see its brilliance? Carl Jung discovered that our true self, like that pearl, never loses its worth, but we can lose our ability to recognize it. He called this the inflation of the ego versus the realization of the self. What Jung found next will fundamentally shift how you see yourself and others. He discovered that the moment you truly recognize your own worth, something magical happens in the psychological field around you. According to Carl Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The seeker realized they have been living as who they thought others wanted them to be, not who they truly were. Jung said. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. The teacher introduced the seeker to what Jung called active imagination, the process of withdrawing energy from external projections. Here's where Jung's discovery becomes absolutely revolutionary. Instead of trying harder to prove your worth, Jung found that you must do the exact opposite, and the psychological mechanism behind this will astound you. Do not argue, do not plead, and do not seek explanations, advised the teacher. When someone doesn't value you, step back in silence. Observe without anger, detach without resentment. This is what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. Carl Jung discovered that when we withdraw our projection from others, we force them to confront their own psychological shadow. They begin to see what they've lost, not because we're manipulating them, but because we're no longer enabling their unconscious devaluation patterns. But what happened next proves Jung's theory beyond doubt. When the seeker implemented this psychological principle, the transformation was so dramatic that it seemed almost magical. The seeker withdrew from those who dismissed them. They stopped offering unsolicited help and ceased initiating conversations. Jung would call this the beginning of the individuation process, the journey toward wholeness. According to Carl Jung, the most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. Jung predicted exactly what would happen next, and his psychological insight was proven correct in the most surprising way. In the seeker's absence, their value became apparent. Tasks once effortlessly handled became burdensome for others. The wisdom and kindness that had been taken for granted were now desperately missed. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Those who had dismissed the seeker were now confronted with their own patterns of taking value for granted. But Jung discovered something even more profound. This wasn't just about others recognizing the seeker's worth. It was about a fundamental shift in psychological energy that Jung called the transcendent function. Let me explain. During this period of withdrawal, the seeker turned inward. Jung said, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." The teacher introduced concepts from Jung's analytical psychology, the anima and animus, the internal masculine and feminine principles that govern how we relate to ourselves and others. Carl Jung discovered that when we have a healthy internal relationship between these aspects of ourselves, we no longer desperately seek validation from external sources. What Jung found about our internal psychological structure will completely change how you approach self-worth. He discovered that you literally have the power to become your own source of validation, and the technique is surprisingly simple. The seeker practiced what Jung called active imagination, engaging in dialogue with their inner self. They repeated the mantra, "I am enough," not because others say so, but because I exist. According to Carl Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Gradually, the seeker's heart grew lighter as they recognized their worth as unshakable and independent of external circumstances. But here's where Jung's theory of the collective unconscious comes into play in the most fascinating way. As weeks passed, people began noticing the seeker's absence. Jung would explain this through his theory of psychological fields. When one person changes their energy, it affects the entire relational system. Some approached with genuine apologies while others remained distant, bound by what Jung called their ego defenses. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." The seeker's transformation created what Jung called a psychological constellation, a new pattern of relating that would fundamentally change every future interaction. For those who returned with sincerity, the seeker welcomed them with compassion, but with newfound clarity. They established what Jung would call conscious boundaries, limits based on self-respect rather than fear. For those who did not return, the seeker let them go without bitterness, embodying what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing emotions without being torn apart by them. According to Carl Jung, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The seeker had achieved this acceptance, and with it came what Jung called psychological wholeness. Jung discovered that when you reach this level of self-acceptance, something extraordinary happens to your entire reality. The change is so profound that it seems to alter the very fabric of your relationships. Carl Jung said, Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. The seeker was now fully awake to their own worth. The teacher offered a final piece of Jungian wisdom. Imagine carrying a lantern through the darkness. If someone refuses the light you offer, do you extinguish it or do you carry it forward, illuminating the path for yourself and others willing to walk with you? But Jung's research revealed something even more amazing about this transformation. When you truly value yourself, you create what he called psychological constellations that influence everyone around you. Carl Jung discovered that authentic self-worth creates what he termed numinous presence, a quality that naturally draws others toward you, not from neediness, but from genuine magnetism. The seeker's transformation wasn't a loud proclamation, but a quiet, steadfast presence. They walked through life with what Jung called quiet confidence, the natural result of psychological integration. In his final teaching, Jung left us with a principle so powerful that it can transform anyone's life. Are you ready to hear it? According to Carl Jung, the lotus does not beg for attention. It blooms in its own time, in its own way. Be like the lotus. This became the cornerstone of the seeker's new life. As the seeker lived authentically, they began attracting relationships and opportunities that resonated with their true self. Jung would explain this through his theory of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that occur when we're aligned with our authentic nature. Jung discovered a universal psychological law that governs all human relationships. When you understand this law, you'll never struggle with self-worth again. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists, but what you accept transforms." The seeker had learned not to resist the reality of their worth, but to accept it fully. Others began seeking the seeker's guidance. Wanting to know the secret to such self-assurance, the seeker shared Jung's wisdom. This is not about teaching others to value you. It's about valuing yourself enough to walk away when they don't. When asked about loving those who undervalue us, the seeker shared Jung's insight. Love is not meant to chain you to suffering. According to Carl Jung, where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, love is lacking. Jung discovered a paradox about love that most people never understand. The secret to loving others fully is first learning to love yourself completely. But here's the twist. To love yourself is to refuse to remain where your worth is diminished. It doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you choose to love them from a distance that protects your peace. Carl Jung said, "The greatest tragedy is not being unloved, but being unable to love yourself." With time, the seeker realized that letting go wasn't merely a strategy to regain value in others' eyes. It was a path to what Jung called psychological freedom. According to Carl Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. When you release the need for validation, you step into authentic living. Jung's final discovery about human psychology will leave you speechless. He found that there's a state of being where you become completely immune to others' opinions while simultaneously becoming more magnetic to the right people. The seeker no longer sought to convince others of their worth. They chose to shine, knowing that those meant to walk alongside them would find their way to the light. One evening, the teacher asked the seeker to observe a pond, watching ripples from a single pebble spread across the water's surface. "Your journey is like this ripple," the teacher explained. Carl Jung discovered that individual transformation creates collective transformation. By valuing yourself, you send waves of psychological health into the world. But Jung's research revealed something extraordinary about personal transformation. When one person truly awakens to their worth, it creates a psychological field that awakens others. According to Carl Jung, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But when you do, you give others permission to do the same. The seeker's final realization embodied Jung's concept of the integrated personality, someone who has reconciled all aspects of themselves into a harmonious whole. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." The seeker chose to become someone who valued themselves completely. Jung's ultimate discovery about human nature will change how you see every relationship for the rest of your life. This is the secret that separates those who struggle with self-worth from those who radiate unshakable confidence. In moments of doubt, the seeker remembered Jung's wisdom. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. In the depths of human experience lies a profound truth that Carl Jung spent decades illuminating. The external world we navigate daily serves as nothing more than a mirror reflecting back the intricate landscape of our internal psychological reality. This principle fundamental to analytical psychology reveals itself most powerfully in those moments when we feel undervalued, dismissed, or overlooked by others. Rather than viewing these experiences as wounds to be avoided, Jung's revolutionary approach transforms them into gateways, opportunities to rediscover our authentic inner strength and reclaim what he termed our psychological sovereignty. The story of the seeker, an archetypal journey that appears across cultures and throughout history, embodies this transformational process. The seeker begins their quest believing that validation, worth, and meaning must be found in the external world, in the approval of others, in societal recognition, or in the accumulation of external achievements. Yet invariably, the seeker discovers that this external pursuit leads only to a hollow dependency, a psychological prison where one's sense of self becomes entirely contingent upon the shifting opinions and valuations of others. Jung understood this pattern intimately, both through his clinical work with patients and his own profound inner journey. He recognized that when we anchor our self-worth in external validation, we become psychological prisoners, not of others, but of our own unconscious need for approval. This dependency creates what Jung called a participation mystique, a state where our psychological boundaries become so blurred with others that we lose touch with our authentic self. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, Jung observed, pointing to one of psychology's most transformative principles. When someone fails to value us, when they dismiss our contributions or overlook our worth, our emotional reaction provides a precise map to our own unconscious psychology. The intensity of our hurt, anger, or disappointment reveals not just what others have done to us, but what we have unconsciously done to ourselves. Consider the person who becomes devastated when a colleague receives recognition while their own efforts go unnoticed. Through a Jungian lens, this devastation points to a deeper psychological truth. Somewhere within their unconscious, they too have failed to recognize their own worth. The external slight becomes a projection screen displaying in vivid detail the internal landscape of self-doubt, self-criticism, and unconscious self-devaluation. This is not to minimize the reality of unfair treatment or genuine mistreatment by others. Rather, Jung's approach empowers us to reclaim our psychological agency by recognizing that our emotional reactions to external events reveal the internal work that needs to be done. When we stop trying to control how others value us, and instead focus on understanding why their valuation affects us so profoundly, we begin the journey toward authentic self-worth. Jung's process of individuation, the journey toward psychological wholeness, requires what he called holding the tension of opposites. When faced with being undervalued, we experience this tension acutely. Part of us wants to fight for external recognition, while another part recognizes the futility of this struggle. Instead of resolving this tension quickly through either external action or internal suppression, Jung's approach asks us to step back and turn inward. This inward turn is not passive resignation or spiritual bypassing. It is an active conscious engagement with our own psychological depths. It requires the courage to ask difficult questions. Why does this person's opinion carry such weight in my psyche? What unconscious beliefs about my worth are being activated? Where did I first learn that my value depended on others' recognition? As we engage these questions with honest self-reflection, something remarkable begins to occur. The external situation that initially felt so threatening begins to lose its power over us. This is not because we no longer care about how others treat us, but because we have established a more solid foundation of self-worth that is not dependent on external validation. Jung discovered that this psychological transformation inevitably manifests in changes to our external reality. When we no longer operate from a place of desperate need for others' approval, we naturally attract different types of relationships and opportunities. We begin to set boundaries that reflect our authentic worth. We make choices based on our inner compass rather than others' expectations. This shift in our psychology literally reshapes the reality we experience. In Jungian psychology, the shadow represents those aspects of ourselves that we have rejected, denied, or failed to integrate. Often our experiences of being undervalued by others activate our own shadow relationship with self-worth. We may discover that we have been unconsciously undervaluing ourselves long before others began treating us poorly. The person who consistently accepts less than they deserve in relationships, careers, or friendships is often projecting their own unconscious self-devaluation onto the world around them. They attract situations and people who mirror back their hidden beliefs about their worth. Jung's approach asks us to own this shadow material, not with self-blame or harsh judgment, but with compassionate awareness. When we can acknowledge that we have been complicit in our own undervaluation, we simultaneously discover our power to change it. This is the paradox of Jungian psychology. By taking full responsibility for our psychological reality, we become free to transform it. Jung's ultimate insight reveals a fundamental choice that each individual must make. We can either live as victims of others' projections and valuations, remaining psychologically dependent on external validation, or we can become conscious creators of our own psychological reality. This choice is not made once but renewed daily, moment by moment, as we navigate the complex web of human relationships and social expectations. The path of psychological freedom requires what Jung called conscious suffering, the willingness to feel the pain of not being valued by others without immediately seeking to escape that pain through external manipulation or internal numbing. In sitting with this discomfort consciously, we develop what Jung termed psychological stamina, the capacity to maintain our center regardless of external circumstances. This does not mean becoming indifferent to others or isolated in our self-sufficiency. Rather, it means developing such a solid relationship with our authentic self that we can engage with others from a place of wholeness rather than neediness. When we no longer need others to validate our worth, we become free to appreciate their recognition when it comes and remain unshaken when it doesn't. Jung concluded his exploration of this principle with words that have guided seekers for generations. Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. This awakening is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of turning toward our inner reality with curiosity, compassion, and courage. In losing what we thought we needed from others, we discover what we truly are. Complete beings capable of recognizing and honoring our own worth. This is Jung's ultimate lesson in valuing yourself. The journey from external dependency to inner sovereignty is not just possible, but necessary for authentic psychological freedom. The choice, as Jung reminds us, remains eternally yours. Will you continue to dream that your worth lies in others' hands, or will you awaken to the sovereign self that has always resided within? Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit from it. And if you'd like to go a step further in supporting this work, you can now leave a super thanks below. It's a small way to say thank you, and it truly helps keep this channel going.